With the absence of sound on our last video, I'll fill you in on roughly what happened. The party continued into the next corridor. There were large effigies of 4 tribal creatures mounted on the wall. Closest to them was a cat creature, then a bear, then a stag, and finally an eagle. There were corridors going off to the north, west, and at the end the corridor turned to the right. The party moved down, checking for tracks. Gartok found no tracks, but spent some time staring at the bear head, drawing a likeness to it with the bear that he'd encountered in many of his visions, even down to the point where it had a similar scar. The party moved on looking for more tracks, noted on the stag head that it was missing part of its antler. Rasvin surmised that it was this the similar part of the antler that formed the antler weapon that Gartok previously had, and it was. Corim, moving on towards where the eagle head was, saw something glinting inside. It was a circlet mounted firmly in the open mouth of the eagle. He reached to try and get it, finding it quite difficult to take. He pulled it and the head snapped shut nearly on his hand. Fortunately, he managed to get his hand out of the way just in time, extracting the circlet. He passed it back to Rasvin for further identification, detecting that it had a magical aura about it. Corim then looked up the northern passage off the far end of this corridor and saw that there were a number of corpses strung up here, all apparently of snake men or lizard folk of some kind, and they'd been mounted on hooks and suspended in alcoves high up on the wall. The party decided against going this way and looked towards the southern corridor, which was completely clean of any debris. Most of the group made their way there, except for Dramos and Gartok, who held back near the bear sculpture. It was during this point that Dramos became distracted by a blue light he saw from the northern corridor. He went slightly that way, trying to draw Gartok with him. The light faded away from him and he went further along, turning to the right, and then left again to look along another corridor. Looking this way, he could see there was some immobile figure apparently guarding what looked like some entrance that had been knocked into the wall. But you see the corridor along here was all solid, made out of these geometric patterns which had seen everywhere, but the left-hand side of the wall had a break in it, and it was there that this figure was stood. Dramos peered round at it. It didn't seem to be moving, but he suspected it was armed. He came back and got Gartok. There was no sign of this light at this stage, and they decided to come back to where the rest of the party were. The rest of the party had gone south. Rasvin, using Hooty to scout ahead, saw there was off the left-hand passage there was a small corridor which ended in an open area. The open area had some steps that led up to a stone platform. On the top of the stone platform was a silver coffer. The group pretty much assembled here, except for Gartok and Dramos, that was still looking up at this northern corridor, and Till, who was trying to keep his eyes on both sides of the party and was near the stag head. Rasvin and Harbinger moved forward first towards where the silver coffer was, putting some pressure on a pressure plate which dropped them into a pit and pivoted up the floor behind them into the ceiling, separating the two groups. Most of the groups took some poison damage at this point as well, and Malmir, surmising it was this dust that was in the air, cast gusts to separate the air and create some clean air for them. Stuck behind the wall, Gartok tried using his weapon to break through the stone of this platform that had come up. He couldn't get through it. It was apparently too tough even for his mace. And Corim and Gartok examined it together, went round the edges and found there was no open seal around, anywhere to get any leverage or finger holds in. The rest of the group split up and started searching the rest of the corridor for any kind of traps or levers or buttons that would release this trap. Inside the small alcove area, Harbinger and Rasvin found just round the corner 2 bodies wearing relatively modern clothes compared with the other denizens they'd found so far beneath the pyramid. In fact, these clothes looked similar to the excavation party they'd seen up above the pyramid several weeks ago when it had yet to be properly uncovered. They had died, apparently sat down or lied down and died. There were still rations in their packs. I was starting to get a bit worried about this. It would seem that they were stuck in here and could find no way out. So it seemed unlikely that the trap would reset itself, or at least quickly. They looked closely at the silver coffer and decided against opening it any further. Couldn't find any further way to get out and got the same result from the rest of the party. So Rasvin eventually used Dimension Door to get both of them through the trap and back out into the corridor. Dramos saw the light again and was tempted towards the corridor, but eventually was called back to the rest of the party. They continued down the south corridor and then turned right, finding another huge set of bronze doors. With the party opening these doors, they found a huge room filled with rank upon rank of statues of warriors. The first few ranks were armed statues with bows and arrows, whereas the rows behind that were all armed with swords and maybe spears behind. There were at least 30 to 40 of these statues, all flanking the side of the room, leading up to what looked like a sarcophagus on a raised platform with a wooden structure over it. Age had affected the wooden structure quite badly, and it was listing to the side. The whole thing was draped with cobwebs hanging down in front of the sarcophagus, inhibiting their view. The room was L-shaped, and there was also an alcove off to the right, which there was a further door which had a huge copper bar through it. Rasvin decided not to take any more risks, unveiled his magic carpet and got on that so as to cross the room without setting off any more pressure plates. He got most of the way across and looked at the sarcophagus, but then, deciding that he shouldn't do this alone, headed back, picked up Corim and Harbinger and went down here. Meanwhile, Till and Dramos started making their way around the edge of the room towards the other exits at the intersection of the L point. They moved past a large black cauldron. The edges of the room here were filled with old sarcophagi which were covered. Just as Rasvin was looking into the sarcophagus at the far end of the room after burning away the cobwebs, he saw some sort of glinting inside. It was at this point that some undead beast leapt from the cauldron where it was concealed and ran across, hacking away at Dramos. Dramos managed to withstand this, but out of the sarcophagi at the side of the room was a vampire woman, a Denzian of Misthass, who had been recently turned. She ran and attacked Till and Dramos. Then a crossbow bolt came in from the shadows and hit Dramos hard. Dramos went down. The rest of the party tried to maneuver to re-engage in this situation, quickly determining that it was Datora who was effectively firing from the shadows and then hiding. Malnir managed to spot her, use his spiritual weapon on her, and Harbinger then also spotting a cast Compel Duel. Datora yelled out that it's your fault that I'm dead as Harbinger ran across the room. Dramos was back on his feet but then went down again under an assail of attacks. The undead creature laid its hand on Gartok's chest, draining him and regenerating his own skin. His grey pallid skin now moved to a more humanoid, flesh-coloured, as if he was coming back alive as he was draining life from Gartok. The battle raged on for several more rounds, with the undead creature finally falling towards the end of the battle, but not before Datora made her way through the party, put another attack in on Dramos, taking him down yet again, and then finally moved in to attack Harbinger. She rolled incredibly well at this point, managing to slide her dagger up under Harbinger's armour plates and do a lot of damage. This broke the concentration on Harbinger's Compel Duel, and Datora used the rest of her move to step back towards where the barred door was. She peeked through a gap in the door and then vanished. The rest of the party took a moment to take stock of things. They quickly healed within a few seconds. Gartok withdrew a potion from his pouch and they threw open the door, attempting to pursue Datora. She wasn't in the corridor at this point. Corridor went on for a distance ahead, and there was a huge stone block right at an intersection. Gartok didn't want to wait any further, and he drank his potion of giant strength, running down the corridor and slamming into this stone block. He was able to move it, and with the assistance of Bigby's hand cast by Rasvin, pushed the stone block further up the corridor. As it moved forward, he could see that it was mounted on some sort of wooden rollers, as if logs had been taken and smoothed off and mounted on poles, as to create a smooth platform for which to move this stone block. Gartok pushed it on easily, much easier than he expected. It moved forward some distance and then started to slope up. Apparently these rollers went up. The rest of the party, fearful of a trap, moved past this point and turned right down a side corridor that was being blocked by the stone block. Gartok jumped out of the way, and the whole party found themselves to the side as the stone block rolled back down to block the corridor again. Not wanting to waste any time, the party pushed further along the corridor, turning right and finding another huge bronze door. Gartok just kicked the door open, revealing a small octagonal room. Inside this, there was a raised platform in the centre, a table of sorts, filled with vases and dishes filled with a silver-like powder. Either side of the table were two flat pallet beds and sheets, and two Goliath female bodies lay on board. The Goliaths were covered in cobwebs and dust, as if having laid here for a very long time, but their chests were both rising and falling, as it was clear that they were breathing. Someone in the party quickly surmised that it was possible that these two may be under the same effects of the 5,000-year-old curse which affected Kellen. The party examined the room quickly, noting that there was a door to the north and another door to the east, and then paused, trying to decide what to do next.